Hi guys, I'm James McIntosh and today I'm joined with a non-league icon. He has scored some memorable goals across his career and has now gone into coaching, currently managing Wimborne. As today I'm joined with the legend himself, Tim Sills. Tim, it's great to have you on. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, pleasure to be on. Always good to talk about football in any sense, but especially when it's about me. So less about me, more about me. So it's all good.
Oh, looking forward to going down memory lane then. Maybe looking at some nostalgia you haven't heard for a few years.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. I mean, people around me can get a little bit bored when I go on about it. So it's always nice to talk about it on another platform because there were some great times throughout my career, and we're still creating them as well. So it's always good to talk them through.
Well, you just mentioned there about still creating some memories. I'm going to start with some more recent news. Over the weekend, Wimborne did beat AFC Tottenham. Can you just talk us through that win because that is amazing for Wimborne?
Yeah, we're on a bit of a run. We've played Merthyr at home and we had Torquay away and came out of those unscathed and went into the Tottenham game full of confidence. Having dragged ourselves a bit further away from the relegation battle, although by no means safe yet. And with Tottenham coming to town, it just gave us a chance to really kind of test where we're at. We were I thought we were best all over the pitch for the whole 90 minutes. Actually quite disappointed to concede in the end. It was fully deserved and a testament to where we're at the moment.
I know it's been Wimborne's first season in the Southern Prem, but have you noticed it's been a more open league this year across the whole board, where any team on their day can really beat anyone, as shown in Wimborne's case?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I've been lucky enough to get promoted a couple of times in my career, and you kind of take that step up, and the bridge isn't too big. But this is kind of probably I think the biggest gap that I've noticed in a promotion. It's a really competitive league, some really big clubs in there, a lot of ambition shown throughout the league in terms of budgets and things. It's been a steep learning curve for us. But like you say, all of a sudden you just get bottom beating top, or you just can't really call it. It'd be a bookie's nightmare, to try and or an ACCA, something that destroys an accumulator and things like that, because it's just so hard to predict from one game to the next who's going to beat who. So it's all about trying to get that consistent run going, which we've managed to do over the last 6 games, and it just shows you how much you can suddenly propel yourself up the league.
Well, it's definitely made the whole league a lot more interesting and I would say entertaining this year. We'll return a bit back to that later in the podcast. But Tim, can you just tell us, the viewers, how you first got into football and your early memories within the game?
Cool. Yeah, we're going back. I don't know how good my memory is, but yeah, I was youngest of 4 brothers, so was regularly, dragged up. I say dragged. I was regularly taken up the park by my 4 brothers on a Saturday, and we go up and play heads and volleys or whatever it would be, and used to go and watch them play, and yeah, just kind of fell in love with it through that. My dad wasn't a big footballer at all, so it was more through my brothers that I kind of grew that love initially. And back in the day, you used to play 11 aside as soon as you were 8 years old, and I played club football, so I was playing with like 12-year-olds. And I mean, you'd look at it now and go, yeah, it's very draconian, and with the way that small-sided football is now set up to help kids develop. But it was great. I wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely loved every second of it, and just played locally. Didn't play for an academy until I was probably 16, and then I went to Millwall for a year when I was 16 years old, and just kind of the love for it grew, and I knew at that point that I probably wanted to try and do something with football as much as I didn't stay at Millwall after that. So it was great times.
You just mentioned there about having that 1 year academy stint with Millwall, but up until that point, you were just enjoying your football. You were playing with your brothers. I feel like that's something very different now compared to the modern side of the game. So you'll get kids drafted into academies at the age of 6, 7, where it's ingrained to them where they've got to be professional at all times, not really focusing on that fun element. Do you think there should be any restrictions, looking at your past experiences, where there should be age limits where kids can be drafted into academies?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because you know, my oldest boy was went into Bournemouth when he was 8 years old. Sorry, I've got my dog here who is
No, right.
really, really annoying. He's going to put his toy away. Yeah, it's what happens on a podcast, isn't it?
Exactly.
So yes, he went into AFC Bournemouth when he was 8. So, and it was one of those decisions where we kind of said, you know, do we do it because it's probably too early. You want him to enjoy his football, but also, you know, you want to give them the best chance of developing as a footballer. And we kind of spoke to the coach at the time who said, you know, about the what was it, 10,000 hours or something to become an expert, and you would like to get that in the academy. And he's, you know, he's still there now. He's in the scholarship. He's with the under 18s, and yeah, he does love football. But you do see at times that probably he has lacked that kind of friendship element a bit more, and that kind of less pressure and fun environment. So yeah, it's a tough one really, because kids do profit a lot from an academy environment in terms of the coaching they get, and you know, how quickly they can develop. So you can see the benefits there, but it's yeah, it's the restrictions, I think, on playing with your friends that probably needs to change more than what sort of age it is. And you know, he personally got most of his kind of friendship enjoyment from football from playing for school and stuff. So as long as they don't take that away, then at least they know they can still kind of have that fun element a little bit as well.
Definitely. And speaking on that same note of academies, I've been watching quite a few documentaries about them, the ones that have been released. It's almost like you've got to choose, obviously, your education rather than football. And that's what you did in your case. You ended up going to university rather than pursuing that career in the Millwall life. I feel like a lot of players, they are forced into making that decision. Should there be a case where in academies you can study a degree alongside it, or maybe it should be forced where them academy players that do go on to get released have that back on plan just in case?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it has changed a lot, obviously, since I was there. So if I'd taken up the YTS offer at Millwall as it was then, as it was at scholarships, yeah, there wouldn't have been a lot of education there. It would have just been, you know, cleaning boots and stuff like that. And I had both my parents were teachers, so you know, I was kind of steered towards the educational path. It has changed a lot now in terms of, you know, my boy is doing a BTEC in a BTEC sport. So he'll have an education even at the end of the 2 years. If he doesn't get taken on as a pro, then at least he's got something to kind of fall back on a little bit. But I think it's once you kind of get beyond that as well, you know, it's a lot of clubs will take on players and keep them on till sort of 2021. And then if they're released then, you know, it's then what have they got? And I'm not sure you can force it onto players in terms of that, taking that degree and, or, you know, an apprenticeship or something like that. But yeah, it could definitely be more encouraged. I know the PFA obviously offer loads and loads of stuff like that that I didn't really know about enough when I was a player. So yes, it's about an education of, you know, what kind of qualifications they can get as well, so that they know that pathway is out there, and to encourage it 100%. You know, it's easy to get stuck in your football bubble and not think about anything else, and you know, believe that that's never going to end. But of course it's going to end. So you need even, you know, by the end, when you retire at 30, 35 or whatever it is, you still need something there to fall back on. And that's where I was fortunate enough to have already got the degree.
Yeah, definitely. And it helped you quite a bit in later life as well, that degree. But also, by going to university, you found your way into non-league. How did that all come along, joining Camberley?
Yeah, they were my local club, and I'd played for my boys' team was called Mitch Athletic, and it was great. You know, I played for them since from under 11s up to under 16s, and really enjoyed that. And again, it was playing with your mates, and then they didn't kind of go into under 18, so I needed to look while I was doing my A levels at what other clubs were locally. Camberley Town were sort of like Wessex Premier level now, I suppose, and they're still at that level, funny enough. And
Wow.
you know, there were a couple of people that in my sixth form who went there and kind of encouraged me to come along, and yeah, so that's what I did. I thought, why not? And didn't really have any expectation around it. Just wanted to get involved with the youth team. Remember playing my first match ever under floodlights when I was about 16, and absolutely loving playing on a Tuesday night under the lights. And just, yeah, kind of went from there. I think I've made my first team debut that year while I was 17, and then became a regular the year after that. And it was a great grounding into men's football. You know, it's you can go through the academy system, and you look at it now, and all the football is meant to be played really, yeah, in really nicely, and it's almost overplay at times, and there's a less physical element. So when a lot of those kids come out and they haven't had that experience or haven't been sent out on loan, they're going to struggle. Whereas at Camberley, I was getting beaten up left, right, and centre every week at the ages of 17, 18, and it quickly propelled me from being a boys player into a men's player.
Do you think then more academies should loan out players into non-league where they can learn that physical grasp of the game? So at Gosport, we got a young player called Harry Lee. He's only 18 years old. He's not the biggest of players, but he's a defender, and I suppose it's going to really improve that side of the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's kind of, I don't know if it's looked down upon a little bit in terms of, the levels that these people are getting sent out to. But I think any level potentially, as long as, probably sending it out to a club that's a good setup and that will nurture them as well and, try and bring them along, then I think it's massively beneficial. We've had a few at Wimborne in the last couple of years from Bournemouth, and we had Johnny Stuttle last year, who's doing great things now in the National League South with Farnborough. And you could just see he was ready, he was itching, he wanted that physicality as well as kind of the technical education that he'd already got from an academy. I think Eastleigh do it very well with their academy. They send a lot of players out even to Wessex Premier level just to give them that experience of men's football. And yeah, physically, you can never replicate that in an academy as much as you might be playing on worse pitches than you're used to, and maybe being involved in games where the ball's in the air a little bit more than you're used to. But that's all part of the football education. And if these players don't make it, they're going to need to be able to do that part of the game as well as all the pretty stuff as well. And I think it's crucial to a player's development.
Well, I think it's fair to say this education worked out perfectly for you. You would go on to play 47 times, ending up scoring 29 goals in your first campaign. Not a bad first season at all.
No, it was an amazing year. Camberley Town was an incredible club. It was horrendous pitch, big slope. Never had a game called off because the water would just run straight down the slope and off the pitch. But yeah, none of us got paid. We'd all go to training and be in the bar till sort of be in the bar till like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Then we'd all go home, and then on a Saturday we'd all be in the bar till sort of 7 o'clock. We'd go home, get changed, go out together, and it was an incredible sort of family-run club, but also a great team spirit for my first, experience of men's football. We went to, I think it was the second season, we went to the FA Cup first round for the first and only time in the history. We had to win 6 games to get to the FA Cup first round, and got drawn away at Brentford, who were top of League Two at the time, and
Wow.
It was only an hour away. And the memories we created there were incredible. I think we lost 5-0. I hit the post at 0-0. That's my memory. But yeah, playing against, players like Herman Hreiderson and he went on to be a bit of a Premier League legend, not always for the right reasons. But Camberley was a great grounding. Like I say, you went to some horrible places, but you had to grow up really quickly.
Yeah, and it definitely taught you that side of the game. And this form, it ultimately led to you joining Basingstoke. What was the reasoning behind this move?
I think after my A-levels, I took a year out in terms of education, and I thought I was just going to, maybe get a part-time job, which I did, and just really try and focus on the football and see how much further up the pyramid I could get. And had a really, obviously, successful season with Camberley, with the FA Cup, and we were doing well in the league and things. It was just Basingstoke opportunity came along as a local club. I think it was, I actually managed to get a move with my brother as well, because I played with my brother at Camberley. So I was on a contract at Camberley. So there were only 2 of us who were put on contract. We got paid £10 a week, of which I rarely saw it, which was always amusing. I think I was owed about 140 quid by the time I left, but that was fine. It wasn't about that. And then, Basingstoke came in with a bit of a bid. There'd been some rumours during the season about various clubs that were interested, but I think it was a 3-league jump up from the Ryman 3 as it was then to the Ryman Premier, which is now sort of National League South, and just made sense. It was only 20 minutes from home, it was a big club from what I was used to.
Did you find it hard then to take that step up? Because obviously during your time at Basingstoke, you would go on loan twice.
Yeah, well, I remember. I think I scored on my debut, and it was Basingstoke was a real up and down club. We'd had one season where we'd come like 3rd or 4th, and then the next season we'd be fighting relegation, and it was a really weird one. So I came in. I kind of butted heads with the manager a little bit at the time. I think he appreciated more of the senior players, and I was a bit of a confidence player at that point. So yeah, there were a couple of times. I think there was a time where I've really kind of fallen out of love with football and went on loan to Staines and scored in the league below. And I think I scored 8 and 6 and absolutely loved my time there. It made me fall in love with football. Went back to Basingstoke, had a really good season. I think I scored 27 goals that year, including the ones at Staines. So I had a really good one. And then the next season, it didn't quite happen again. And it was all a bit weird why it didn't really properly kick on at Basingstoke. And I just remember we played Kingstonian away. And it was a lovely grounds, loved it. It was a big changing room, good pitch, big crowd, former conference club. And I kind of said, I think I came home and I said, I could see myself playing there one day. And 2 days later, they came in for me on loan. And I went out there on loan, really enjoyed it, and then pushed a move through there. So, yeah, Basingstoke was a frustrating one because I did score some goals there and we had some good times, but just never really got shown that consistent faith in me to, at that age, to kind of really take my career on. So a couple of, bumps in the road, but everyone's going to have them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about having that faith in you. I think that's one of the big reasons why you did excel at Kingstonia. So looking at your stats, you scored 21 in 41 games. And you mentioned about enjoying your game. How important is it enjoying your game, and how does that correlate to how you perform on the pitch?
Yeah, it's huge, that season. I mean, I don't think that includes cup goals. Not that I'm pedantic about it, but it's definitely 28 goals that year. But yeah, I just remember Steve Sedgley was the manager who used to play for Tottenham and is still heavily involved in football. And I went in for my debut and we were playing top of the league at home against Canvey Island. And I was a bit nervous and he could sense that, so he kind of dragged me into his office and he was asking me why I was nervous. Bigging me up, and then just as I was leaving, he said, "Oh, by the way, I've put tenner on you for first goal scorer," and it just made me feel $1 million, And I went out, I did score the first goal. I don't know if he ever had that tenner on me or not, but you're right. It's, at the end of the day, when I played, it was probably a different time back then in terms of players didn't, you just get on with it. If you got a telling off, then you'd kind of brush yourself down, and that was fine. It wasn't necessarily a real focus on man management like it is now. You don't really have that, where players, some need an arm around the shoulder, some might need a bit more of a harder approach. But I was always one of those that would secretly crave a bit of praise and a bit of love and encouragement. And there were a couple of points in my career where it just happened that I went with the right person at the right time in terms of the coach or the manager who would big me up at a low point and really get my career back on track. And I think that's important now. I think players now need a lot more love than probably they used to, or maybe now it's just more focused on. But it's important that you kind of try and get the best out of everyone and work out how to do that with each individual as well.
How hard is it learning what each player needs, speaking from a manager's point of view now?
I don't think it's that difficult. I mean, it's a time thing as well sometimes as a manager. So I know I should probably do it more than I do in terms of the one-on-one conversations and the chats that we have. It's if we were full-time, it'd be easy, but when you're part-time, you're just kind of trying to muddle through as much as you can. But yeah, it's one of those where a lot of no one hates praise as well. So if you can be positive, it's great. Everyone wants honesty. Everyone wants as much feedback as they can get and as you can give them. And for me, it was always one of those where I'd want to know if I wasn't playing. It might not be that I'd have to know why I wasn't playing, although that's up to me to go and ask the manager. But yeah, everyone just wants some honesty. Everyone wants a bit of love sometimes. And it's less common now that someone wants a good old fashioned rollicking, as it were, but every now and then that needs to come out, and I think that's important as well. I think if you're gonna use the whip, I suppose, and actually be a bit more harsh, it's important not to do that all the time. I think you've got to have it as an impactful thing to bring it out every now and then, but everyone's got different personalities, so you just need to work out what works for some and what doesn't work for others.
Well, whatever the Kingstonian manager was saying to you, it clearly worked, because your form did lead to you joining Aldershot. They would have been conference at the time. I'm pretty sure this would have been the biggest step up of your career up until that point.
Yeah, 100%. You know, going from regional league to a national league, and it's one of those stories that came about. It was all yeah, Kingstonian were in a bit of unrest, shall we say, in terms of the
Mm.
ownership. Aldershot came in, and just how it so happened that the opportunity felt good for me. It was it was only 10 minutes from my house, which was ideal. Going into you know, like you say, a tougher environment into a lot more pressured environment. Suddenly going from playing in front of sort of 600-700 people a week to playing in front of 3,000 people a week. It was their first, you know, they'd been in Kingstonian's league and they just got promoted, so it was their first season in the conference. We were still part time against, you know, a lot of full time clubs, and so yes, it was a huge step up. It was I wouldn't say it was a gamble, because I always felt like I was good enough to do it. And yeah, having scored 28 goals in the league below, I knew I was you know, more than good enough to do it. It was just about trying to get off to a good start and actually coming to terms with, you know, Halifax away on a Tuesday night and stuff like that, while still having a job and all that stuff. I remember, yeah, Blythe Spartans away on a Tuesday night north of Newcastle, and having to get back for work on the Wednesday, and yeah, just a lot more pressure. But Aldershot was a great club, so it was a good club to do it with.
Well, in your first season with Aldershot, I think it was phenomenal. I'm pretty sure you spent all but 3 days in the playoffs, and in the end, you ended up getting your way to the final. So not a bad first season with the shots at all.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like I say, we averaged over 3,000 fans. It was, yeah, some incredible times. Just defied the odds, I think, more than anything.
Mm.
You know, playing against big clubs, big established clubs, full-time clubs, and like you say, just got ourselves up in the playoffs. Kind of held on, scraped our way in there in the end. I think we were 21 points behind Hereford, who were second, who we played in the playoffs.
Mm.
And then beat them on penalties. And yeah, everyone's going, what an injustice. They were 21 points ahead of us. We didn't really care at that point, to be honest. And then, yeah, got to the final at Stoke. Wasn't at Wembley in those days, unfortunately, because it wasn't quite ready at that point. So we went to Stoke City and played Shrewsbury and lost on penalties. And yes, I did miss a penalty in the penalty shootout. But it was, yeah, when you look back on it, it was an incredible season. We massively overachieved that year, and ended up with us then going as a full-time outfit in the summer, and that was my first foray into full-time professional football.
Well, you mentioned about having that penalty shootout. It's the cruelest way to go out, I would say, with any of them. But after that game against Shrewsbury, was the manager repeating what you just said there? That you did defy the odds, you did have a great season, and that you could really challenge again the following season?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember going in for my contract negotiations at the end of that season, because I'd only been on a year's contract, so and they wanted to take me on again, and I asked for you know, a bit of a raise in terms of money, because I knew I was getting probably underpaid for what the level was. And I just remember them kind of coming back at me and going, oh, you know, why do you warrant such a big pay rise and all that? And I just said to him, look, I told you at the start of last season I'd get you promoted. And he dropped me for the playoff final, actually. He only dropped me twice that year. Once was the playoff final and once was the FA Trophy semi-final second leg, of which we lost both. But yeah, and I just kind of just looked him in the eyes and just said, I said I'd get you promoted. You dropped me for the final and look what happened. And it was, you know, you had to be arrogant to a certain extent in negotiations. You had to become someone you weren't necessarily comfortable with being at times, to make sure you got what you deserve. But yeah, the message was that we just had to improve. And like I say, going full time was always a bit of the unknown as well. So bringing in a bit of an overhaul with the squad, with those who couldn't do the full time football. And yeah, just looking ahead and trying to, you know, it is a heartbreak losing in a playoff final, especially on penalties. So it was about how we reacted to that and making sure that it was freshened up, ready for the next year.
Was it almost bittersweet after that final? Obviously, you just mentioned there you weren't included in the final 11. When you're seeing your side down and you know you can make an impact, surely in a weird way you must feel a little bit almost like a smirk going on, saying, if you would have included me in the squad, Gaffer, the score could have been totally different. We could be 1-0 up.
It is a tricky one. I mean, in a normal game, I would say that's 100% true. You know, as
Mm.
much as you want your team to win, you probably want, you know, if anyone's honest, you probably want the striker not to score. If you're a striker,
Yeah.
you quite happily win 1-0 and it come off the defender's arse or something like that. But yeah, you kind of sitting out. Yeah, in a playoff final, it's a bit different. I think you know, as much as I had a sulk up the day before when when he announced the side, and I wasn't in it, and they practiced penalties, and I decided not to. I stormed off and sat on the coach, and then missed my penalty the next day. So that was a bit of a regret. But yeah, you're kind of watching it, knowing you can make a difference, itching to get on there, knowing what you've done all season as well, and feeling a bit hard done by, and just didn't quite get the chance in normal time to really have that impact. I mean, to be fair, during that season, I had been struggling with a hernia, so I had an operation on both my groins at the end of the season, but I was still more than ready to play that game. And you're watching it, hoping that the strikers aren't doing particularly well, but that you still come on with a real chance to make a difference.
Well, definitely. And even though you didn't win it, I would say overall it was a pretty successful year for you. Not talking about Aldershot, you did actually get your first international cap. In 2003, you got to play for the England C team against the Belgium team. What was that like, getting your international cap then?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I was at Kingstonian at the time, and it was a real weird situation because I think the conference were having a bit of an argument with the FA, and it turned out that basically for that game, none of the conference players were going to get selected, and I was obviously in the league below, so they then had to choose from those players, and just randomly was sat in my office doing my day job, and got a call from my manager to say that I'd been picked for the England non-league squad, and I just kind of told him not to be stupid, and he just didn't really believe it. But yeah, once I found out it was obviously true, and we went to Belgium away, got treated like the actual England team. So it was just an incredible setup with the training and the kit and the travel and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that was a huge dream come true that I never even considered, to be honest. And I was on the bench for that game, came on with about half an hour to go, and got an assist for our goal as well. But I just remember standing on the sideline with an England shirt on, ready to come on and represent my country, and just kind of being the best moment of my career by miles at that point. And just really privileged to have a cap that's now framed with the shirt and a picture of me in an England shirt, and something again that no one can ever take away from me is that I've represented my country at whatever level it is. But it was a real proud moment.
I've been told apparently when you start singing the national anthem, you get goosebumps just sent straight down you.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And I have to say the ones that we did at Wembley when we've had playoff finals and trophy finals, when the national anthems come on, and obviously I've started and been on the pitch. I mean, that's a different level. But to know that you're kind of going to represent your country and get a chance that you never thought you were going to dream of, hearing that national anthem is definitely a special moment.
Well, to be honest, Tim, I think you would have done a better job than the main England players with some of the last World Cups we've witnessed. But going back to your club career as well in Aldershot, you mentioned about having that transition from where you were part-time with Aldershot and suddenly you would be going to full-time. What was this like, making that transition? Because I know a lot of players in the past, they said it has been hard with the lack of sports science at the time.
Yeah, very much so. Like I say, I think in the year before, obviously, I'd run my groins into the ground, and no one had given me advice about resting or anything like that. So the lack of sports science at that point, you didn't really think about it because you didn't know it was there because it wasn't there. So going into full-time football, it was a big change. It was amazing. It was what I'd always dreamed of. So I was absolutely buzzing for it to grab the opportunity with both hands. I think the main thing for me was how my body reacted to it. So training full time like that suddenly took its toll, and I think it was the first time I ever got tonsillitis was when I became a professional footballer, and then ended up getting it 3 times in 6 months, and actually ended up in the playoff semi-final at the end of that season with tonsillitis, trying to get through a game, and ended up having them out. And I put that fully down to the rigors of full-time football and the impact it had on my immune system. But it was amazing. It was being able to train every day and take yourself on to another level, and be able to probably manage yourself actually a lot better, because you're not just training on a Tuesday and Thursday night and desperately hoping that you're going to be fit for a Saturday. You had all week to prepare for it. So I really enjoyed it. I loved the transition. I think it was the end of that season, the first season at Aldershot, I had a chance to go to Bristol Rovers, who came in for me. I went and looked around the ground, and they were obviously very well established in League Two at the time. And I just decided to stay at Aldershot just because I knew I was going from part-time to full-time football. And I wanted to do it at a place that I was comfortable at, where I knew I was loved, where it was quite close to home as well. And it turned out to be the right decision for me.
You mentioned about having that link there with Bristol. Is it hard to sometimes keep your head down when you have got offers going around you?
Yeah, I think that one was all right because it came at the end of the season. So I kind of knew the interest was there, and yeah, I was quite close to going. I would have got a lot more money at Bristol Rovers as well than I was at Aldershot. But yeah, it's always flattering. I remember being at Camberley Town and one day someone telling me that there was an Arsenal scout watching, and at that point you're like, not sure
Blimey.
about that.
Mm.
But it's great, it's great having that interest because you're doing something right. And it was the season after when I left Aldershot after the second season, in my third season when I left, and yeah, there were a lot of rumours at that point in the transfer window, and it was a bit harder then, I suppose, to kind of keep focused on what you were doing, but yeah, you just take it as a compliment, a massive compliment.
Well, one of the teams that was definitely interested in you was Oxford United. They would go on to sign you for 50,000. Signing a non-league player for that price tag. I mean, it's going to take you its toll. Like you said, I'm sure you felt very privileged about getting signed for such a large portion of money. But was it also maybe a double-edged sword that would go on to really, I don't know, put a lot more anxiety on your performances going forward in that season?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think, I'd obviously done well at Aldershot. I think I'd even scored 10 goals by Christmas of the season that I ended up leaving and going to Oxford. But it was actually it was a bit of a weird one that year because everything was about Leyton Orient. So Leyton Orient, I think, were third or fourth in League Two. Martin Ling was the manager, and they were the ones that were basically negotiating with Aldershot, negotiating with me. I'd been up to Leyton Orient, had a look around the ground. That was where I thought I was going. And then at the last minute, Oxford came out of nowhere, obviously tabled a really healthy bid for me. I think I played against Canvey Island on a Tuesday night, scored. And then on the Wednesday, I was up in the Oxford manager's office, basically signing for them. And they were kind of just below mid-table. They'd been struggling a little bit. I probably didn't do my due diligence enough at that point because I didn't realize they just sold their two best wingers, one to Italy and one to another club in League Two. So when I went in there, I probably didn't realise exactly what I was going into. It was a big old club, great support. Things kind of didn't work out initially. The manager got sacked. It was, I think, probably the only time actually I think I've been involved at a club where a manager's got sacked. And then after that, we had another manager come in who was a young manager who was involved with the youth team. He put a lot of faith in us, put a lot of faith in me. My performances then increased and we were doing really well. And then Jim Smith came in, the old Pompey, Portsmouth and Derby, and came in with a consortium, took over, ousted the manager that had been doing really well, and just went downhill from there. I have to say, I did not enjoy 1 minute of working under Jim Smith, which is really weird for such an experienced coach. You think it'd be the best thing ever, but after that it was all downhill, unfortunately, and ended up ironically with relegation on the last day in a match against Leyton Orient, who won to get promoted. Wow. So they won, they went up, we lost, we went down, and I just looked at it, and I didn't even get on the pitch that day. I just looked at it and just went, oh, that was probably a bit of a mistake then.
Yeah, I bet it was one of those real sliding doors moments. And then when you're in that sort of dressing room, how hard is it for the whole team as well? I'm guessing there was a lot of noise from the fans who must have been very unhappy about it. How hard is it to tune all of that out?
Yeah, I mean, football fans are obviously quite fickle anyway, and I am myself as a Man United supporter. I mean, God, at the moment,
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
not fickle, you've got to be fickle to stay sane. But yeah, I realise that fans can be really fickle, and I'd come from Aldershot where the fans were amazing. They were absolutely incredible. I absolutely loved playing in front of them. It's going to Oxford where obviously the atmosphere wasn't great, and all of a sudden, feeling like being in out of your comfort zone with fans that aren't always completely supportive. It was the changing room had some really, really good characters in it at Oxford. It was a really good changing room in that respect. And I just remember our captain, Chris Hargreaves, who I then went on to play with Torquay, coming in after the after the game against Leyton Orient and just losing his head, but losing his head at the manager as well, which was really interesting. Just kind of sitting back and watching it, because I was almost like a bit of an outsider at that point, just watching him from the outside, and just seeing him rip into this experienced manager about how he'd, shouldn't have come in and shouldn't have, we wouldn't have gone down if he hadn't come in and things like that. And you just at that point going, okay, yeah, I'm not quite sure where this is going to go for next year. But yeah, ended up kind of moving on in the summer, which I think was best for all parties in the end.
So when you're in that sort of position, are you always looking for an exit door to try and get out of the club? Because I know Exeter, they were lining up to buy you, but you were going to sign for Hereford. So there was clearly multiple teams interested in signing you.
Yeah, it hadn't quite happened. I think I only scored one at Oxford in about 13 appearances or something. A few of those off the bench, but yeah, just hadn't really happened at all for me. And yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. And then I was more than prepared to stay and fight, but I just didn't really want to play under Jim Smith there. If I'm being honest, I didn't feel like my career was going to go in the way I wanted it to, or that I was going to get the opportunities. Even they just got relegated to the conference, where obviously I'd done really well before. But yeah, so it was one of those where I knew clubs were interested. I think I had an agent at the time who was speaking to Oxford, and I think he came back to me. I was on holiday actually, I remember, and he came back to me and he just said, we were seeing if Oxford would basically settle up my contract so I could move on. And he came back and said Jim Smith said I could rot in the reserves for the season.
Wow.
While on holiday, so that was nice. So I just said to my agent, "Well, go back and tell Jim that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy to do that. I'll sit on my money. Why would I not? I had a contract for the next year, so I'd happily sit on it." And then had an offer to leave the club within about 10 minutes. And then had my choice a little bit. I think it was Hereford. I think it was Exeter. I think it was Boston as well, where Steve Evans was. Were kind of all interested, but Hereford had just got promoted, and I wanted to try and stay in the Football League. So that was the one that made sense to me at the time.
Before we look at Hereford, I just want to return back to your situation at Oxford. You mentioned there about the manager. I'd say he was pretty cruel to you, to say the least. When you have that sort of relationship with a manager, and it wasn't just you said about Chris Hargreaves, he had a massive go at the manager. Can players almost form this consortium and go to perhaps the chairman and maybe try and argue a point, or would the chairman just not even acknowledge it at all?
In that situation, there was no point, because he was part of a consortium that took over the club, so he had
Oh, okay, yeah.
he had the owner's ear anyway. But I don't think I've ever been in a dressing room. In fact, I know I've never been in a dressing room where the players have kind of ganged up against the manager. Ultimately, we were all professionals, and we just had to get on with it, whatever the situation was at the club. It wasn't it wasn't like I was going to training and not trying my hardest, or if I did get a chance, that I wouldn't try as best I could. It was 100% that I would do that, but that was because of my own personal pride and my own personal professionalism. You do hear now about you've lost a changing room with certain managers, or the players aren't playing for them, and I just look at that and I just think I can't even fathom that, why you would go out on a football pitch and not try your absolute hardest just due to personal pride as much as anything. And it's a short career, so why would you waste it by being a disruptor when you could potentially be a hero at any given moment? So it's a bit of an anomaly to me, that one.
Speaking on the same note, you hear it a lot of bigger teams, so Manchester United, I remember you had it with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Do you feel it's also down to how big egos have become in football?
Yeah, probably. They talk about player power now, and it's I think that's certainly true at certain levels. But yeah, it is much tougher. The days of Alex Ferguson and people like that, Brian Clough, and you couldn't be a manager like that now, who would come in and throw teacups around, or get in people's faces and scream and things like that, because all of a sudden you'd have somebody going off to the PFA probably, or immediately, and kind of not reacting to it very well. So you have got to be mindful of it. And it's a very different approach now, but yeah, you've got to stay as positive as you can in every situation, but it's not always easy.
Well, after a turbulent season with Oxford, it could have been very easy to drop. And then I remember your first friendly I was reading up, you scored 4 goals in your first game for Hereford. Was this almost like a way of saying, I mean, to your former Oxford manager, look what I can do. Try and get in his face as well as doing it, like you said, for personal pride as well.
Yeah, not so much. I mean, Oxford, I wasn't there long enough to kind of form that real bond with the club that you'd probably care enough to do that. I know there were times in my career before where I played against an old club. So when I left Basingstoke and went back there with Kingstonian, I remember we had them at home and we beat them 2-1 and I scored both goals and very much enjoyed that. I have to say, and made sure that the manager at Basingstoke knew how much I enjoyed that as well. But yeah, I think the Hereford one was just for me about hopefully getting a new lease of life, staying in the Football League, which is where I thought, I felt I belonged, having proven it at the level below over a few years. So it was more about trying to get off on the right foot, which obviously I did in the friendly. It was, it wasn't against the greatest club in the world, but yeah, it was nice to just feel like I could actually get back into scoring ways again and enjoying my football.
Well, despite the positive start, I would say overall it was a pretty turbulent season for yourself. You struggled with goals, and I would say the real turning point in your season was a red card against Swindon. Was that almost like the final nail in the coffin at that point?
Yeah, it was a weird old season because we were newly promoted. So I think for Graham Turner, the manager, it was all about just surviving in the league, and that was the way we played. We were very, very defensive. I remember, we were playing two up front, but we were expected to track the fullbacks all the way back to basically if they didn't overlap, we would be the ones that would be expected to go with them. So yeah, chances were slightly few and far between, but still had some great moments. Remember, we beat Coventry 3-1 in the League Cup, and I was playing with Stuart Fleetwood, who is now the Swindon Supermarine manager, who I get to see on Saturday this week. But yeah, that was an amazing game, and I had a great game that day. And yeah, didn't quite get the goals that I wanted to. Again, only scored a couple that year, and did all right in the County Cup, but you don't really count so much. But ultimately, it was about us staying up as a group, and that's what we achieved. And the red card at Swindon was, yeah, certainly a bizarre one. Having played for Oxford, they were giving me a bit of stick. They were Swindon fans, so I just remember pointing to my name on the back of my shirt and the referee coming over and booking me for it. And I was just like, why have you booked me? I've only pointed at my name. And then he booked me again. And immediately I was just like, okay, that was weird. And to be fair, the manager at the time did back me on it because I think the referee even admitted he shouldn't have sent me off. But yeah, when things aren't going well and then you get something like that happen to you, and it was on a Saturday and we were playing on the Monday, I think it was over Easter, and I knew I was starting on the Monday. So to get sent off on the Saturday and then not be able to start on the Monday was probably just about the final nail in the coffin. But yeah, like you say, it was a bit turbulent that season as well. But ultimately, we achieved our goal of staying up. It was just, not the most enjoyable season for me personally.
Well, you say that wasn't the most enjoyable season. I think we're coming up to the bit in the podcast where you will definitely be getting the most enjoyment speaking about it, because the season after, you would go on to join Torquay. You would have offers to go and join former team Aldershot, but why was it Torquay that really caught your eye?
Yeah, the Aldershot interest was kind of there, but not hugely concrete. And again, I think they were obviously quite well fancied but I think Torquay had just come down. So I remember Hereford played Torquay last game of the season at Torquay. And again, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, it's quite a nice place. But I remember when the Torquay interest first came in and I was living in Cheltenham, and I just looked at it on the map and I was just like, that's so far away from everything. I just didn't think it was going to suit myself or the family. And, I'd already dragged them from kind of living in near Aldershot to living up in Cheltenham, and just, had to be mindful of where we went next. And it was actually Crawley who were showing the biggest interest along with Torquay at the time, which was Steve Evans again. And yeah, Torquay was one of those where immediately I said to my agent, I think I said to him, only if they buy me a plane to get me down there, like a bit of a flippant remark, of which he went and told them that, which wasn't quite in the playbook of how to negotiate a contract. But yeah, to be fair to Torquay, Paul Buckle was the manager. He got me to come down, have a look around. I took my wife and our daughter, and he was very clever. He met us at Babbacombe, which is an absolutely beautiful beach, down a hill on Torquay with a lovely cafe there. left my wife and our daughter there while they could have a little paddle and do some crabbing and all that sort of stuff while we went and looked around the ground, and sold us the dream. And I'd played briefly with Paul Buckle at Aldershot before he left, and yeah, it just felt right. And I remember being on my honeymoon at the time, and Steve Evans texting me on my honeymoon to find out if I was going to be going to Crawley, and I think he knew I was on my honeymoon, so that kind of made my mind up that I was probably going to Torquay, whatever, at that point. And again, it was for a bit less money than Crawley were offering me, but turned out to be the best decision of my career to that point, because I was at a real low point, having not done very well at Oxford and not done very well at Hereford. And Torquay was a gamble, but turned out to be a great one.
You mentioned about how the past seasons you were struggling a bit and you were in a bit of a bad mental state. When you did join Torquay, you were just scoring for fun at times. Why do you think the change in form was so drastic?
Again, it comes down to the man management. So I just remember the whole of pre-season, Paul Buckle just bigging myself and the other strikers up. And I just remember him saying things like, you're going to tear this league apart. And just going into the season feeling like $1 million, having kind of signed for Torquay feeling like $1. And he just built me back up again. He built me from a shell into the player I knew I could be. I remember actually our first game of the season was at home to Grays Athletic, and we drew 0-0, and the fans were getting on our back already. And I think because they'd been relegated the season before, it was already quite a bad environment. And after that game, I was a bit like, oh no, surely not again. Surely it's not going to be another failure of a club. And then we went to Aldershot for my second game, Aldershot away, and I scored, and that was it. I never looked back after that. And again, I think we averaged over 3,000 a week in both my seasons, full seasons at Torquay. And it was one of those pivotal moments in my career where it could have gone one way or the other. I could have completely fallen out of love with football. But actually, Bucks was the one that real sort of dragged me back up and made me fall in love with it again. Love the area, absolutely love Torquay. And it was a great family club. And that was me back in love with football.
Well, I would definitely say you were rewarded for it, because in March 2008, after 10 years, Torquay, they got back to Wembley. This must be a cherished moment for you, your first time playing at Wembley.
Yeah, it was incredible. I think we had York in a two-legged FA Trophy semi-final, and I'd scored in the first leg, and then we went up there and I think we lost 1-0, but won 2-1 on aggregate. And the last 10 minutes was horrific. I think I'd been substituted off with about 10 minutes to go, and just watching the clock tick down and just knowing that Wembley was so close. So the celebrations in the change room afterwards were really special. I remember ringing my wife and my parents and things, and just letting them know that I was going to Wembley, because I think as a kid that was probably my dream even more than being a professional footballer, was having grown up watching all those FA Cup finals and England games, and just how incredibly iconic Wembley is. Just being able to know that I was going to walk out on that pitch and represent a football club in a competitive game was something special. And it didn't quite work out, unfortunately. In the final, I lost 1-0 to Ebbsfleet at the time, but was still just an incredible experience and something that I knew no one could ever take away from me at that point.
Well, I'm not going to talk too much about that Wembley final, because the following year you only did better. Can you just talk me through the following season, because it was miraculous for Torquay?
Yeah, we didn't start very well, actually. The following season, we were really struggling after about 8 games. I think I'd struggled a little bit. I think I scored in the first game of the season and then struggled a little bit after that, and ended up actually getting dropped for a game at home to Northwich Victoria. Manager brought me on, well, whatever minute it was, and then we got a penalty in I think it was the 97th minute at 1-1, and he shouted onto the pitch that I had to take it. So I mean, I didn't mind taking penalties. I was never the most confident, having obviously missed in a playoff final, probably tells you that. But managed to scuff it into the top corner, and the rumor is that it pretty much saved his job in that one moment. It also got me firing again, and I never really looked back. And after that, we went from strength to strength, pushed Burton Albion relatively close to the title. But then, having had that heartbreak the season before of losing in the playoff semi-final to Exeter, our biggest rivals, it was it was very much this time more about business. So yeah, it was. I think we played Histon in the semi-final, and after winning that second leg, I think the cameras came into the change room expecting the champagne to be flowing and everyone to be jumping around, and it was just a normal game for us. It was job done. We were now all eyes focused on Wembley. I think we saw that Cambridge, who won the other semi-final, they were throwing champagne around and dousing the reporter with water and all that sort of stuff. And we just kind of at that point went, right, we've got the edge now because we're already looking ahead to business. And yeah, the second season was incredible, you know, culminating in another Wembley appearance, and what a day it was.
You mentioned about having that turbulent start to the season and the change after. You were saying it was brilliant. You got a goal-defining, probably goal that really did determine their season. Why do you think there was such a drastic change between the start and the end of the season?
Yeah, I think there was maybe a bit of a hangover from the season before, as much as you don't want there to be. I know we brought in a few more players, and so maybe that was taking a bit more time to bed them in and get used to each other. But yeah, you know, it's you just sometimes need a catalyst. You need a moment in a season to really get it going, and just so happened that was it that year. I think, you know, once you start badly in a season, I think, especially after getting so close the season before, I think that's when it's yeah, it makes it even harder then to turn it around, and you are just looking for or praying for a moment. And yeah, luckily we got it, and that was it. Then we were on a roll, and don't think we ever looked back after that. And we kind of always had the belief that we could go one better than the season before.
And you mentioned about after that semi-final, you did get through to the final, but you also said the changing rooms, they were much different to Cambridge. You weren't really that celebratory, you weren't celebrating too much. Was it hard to soak in Wembley at all during the second final when you still do have that job to do of getting Torquay that promotion?
Yeah, I think the season before, obviously, I remember we soaked in completely. We went up about 3 or 4 days before, which we wouldn't normally do. We got the ill-fitting Marks and Spencer suits, and went out on the pitch beforehand. You know, I remember looking up at the stands and seeing my family in the stands and having a bit of a tear in my eye, and it just being a real sort of nostalgic moment. Whereas the second season, we turned up a day before like we normally would. We wore tracksuits to the ground. We went out and it was completely business. There was no emotion involved in terms of Wembley. It was all just, you know, focusing on the job. And yeah, it was brilliant. Paul Buckle, to be fair, you know, got it absolutely spot on in that respect, because we didn't want to feel like we had the year before. You know, you don't want to lose at Wembley at all. So to have lost twice would have been horrendous. And we were playing Cambridge, who'd lost in the playoff final the year before as well to Exeter. So we knew that we kind of had a bit of a psychological edge already on them, and yeah, it was a completely different atmosphere. But I don't think it took anything away. I think once, you know, we won the game and did what we were there to do, that was when you could really soak in Wembley, which is probably the mistake we've made the year before, where we kind of soaked it in a bit too early.
Well, Tim, paint me the picture of your iconic goal. You're leading 1-0 at Wembley against Cambridge in front of a crowd of over 35,000. The iconic Wembley turf. You see a cross come in, you header it in, sees the back of the net. What's going through your mind at that point?
I mean, that's yeah, that's a difficult question. I mean, yeah, I don't really like to talk about it. Said no one ever, but yeah, you know, I think it was a combination of things that day. I think just before half time, I talk about it. Sometimes I ruptured all my ankle ligaments just before half time, jumping as I went to jump for a ball. I trod on someone's foot, and I've never been in pain like it. And I went in at half time, and I remember my physio taking my boot and my sock off and using an expletive as soon as he saw my ankle, and I was just like, oh no, this could be it. So I just begged him. I said, get me out there, whatever happens. And our club doctor, who was an absolute legend, called Andrew Ryan, he went, right, well, let's give it a go. You shouldn't be doing it because you can do yourself so much more damage. So they put 3 injections in my ankle, gave me painkillers, strapped it up to within an inch of its life, and I managed to get through the rest of the game. And yeah, 74th minute, we were defending a free kick. I was in my own box as it got cleared. I think I was in line with the penalty spot, and then just saw it. It was almost like a bit of an out of body experience, I think, where you can kind of see
Yeah.
what's just starting to build up. And yeah, got from our penalty spot to their penalty spot. I think someone timed it in about 10.5 seconds or something, which with one ankle and not being the quickest player anyway was definitely an effect that Wembley had on you. And just saw the cross come in from Wayne Carlisle, and you know, he says to this day that he had two other options in the box, but he saw me coming and knew that was the only option he was going to pick out. And yeah, it was the best cross I've ever seen. You know, I think I probably remember looking at it and thinking, there's no way I can miss that. I didn't have to break stride, just literally just get my head on it and guide it into the corner. And yeah, after that, it's pandemonium. You know, I think the pictures and the videos and are things that I'll always look back on. And you talk about the national anthem giving you goosebumps. Yeah, 100%. But every time I watch it or see a picture of it, you know, that's goosebumps for me, because yeah, there was only one thing on my mind at that point, and that was to go and celebrate in front of the family who'd all come to watch, and do my Zorro celebration because I had the mask on.
Yeah, that was cool.
Which was very very cheesy, but absolutely no regrets. And then yeah, being 2-0 up in the 74th minute against 10 men was kind of almost job done then. We just had to kind of see it out. And I remember standing there in the 93rd minute and we had a goal kick, and just knowing it was done because we were literally in the last seconds of the game, and yeah, nearly kind of breaking down at that point because you know you've achieved what you've kind of always dreamed of as a kid. And just yeah, the best day of my footballing life by an absolute mile.
Well, you mentioned about almost when you went up to go and get that header, it was a bit of an out of body experience. When you did climb up to get that header, was it just like, I suppose, any other header? Could you only see the back of the net and ultimately you scoring? You couldn't see anything else in that moment in time?
Yeah, that's the beauty of football. You know, you can, doesn't matter how big the crowd is, where you're playing, what anyone's shouting at you, anything like that. If you see a ball coming in like that at any point as a striker, yeah, you there's absolutely nothing else that's on your mind. You know, you could be anywhere. You could be down the park with your friends, or you could be playing in front of one man and his dog. It just so happened to be the best cross I've ever been on the end of was at Wembley in front of 35,000 people in probably the second biggest game in football, other than the Championship playoff final. You know, the one game to try and get you into the Football League. And yeah, couldn't be more blessed to have been on the end of it. And just did what I had to do. You know, that was my strength. Heading was always going to be my biggest strength, and to get that chance on the biggest stage of all was something that I was eternally grateful to Wayne Carlisle for.
Well, I normally ask the question at the end of the podcast to the player or manager, what's been the favourite moment of your career so far? I think this has to be the favourite moment of your career. Do you think there's any way of beating this now?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, being a manager now, it's a slightly different kind of enjoyment that you get. So because obviously you're not actually affecting it directly on the pitch, and it's so much more hard work that you put into it behind the scenes. And so last year, obviously winning the title with Wimborne at Melksham, at such a good ground as Melksham, and even then I think we were 3-1 up with about a couple of minutes to go, and it was the same sort of feeling where you kind of all the emotions almost take over you. And I think we had about 800 Wimborne supporters there, and yeah, that's about as close as I've been. I think I've won a few things in my career and got a few promotions, but in terms of pride and all the hard work that went into it and the pressure that was on us last year as well, I'd definitely say that day at Melksham was as close as I could get. But nothing can really beat scoring at Wembley.
And then also, you mentioned about the celebrations Torquay had after that game. They were surreal. But what I found really surprising was not too long after that final, I'm pretty sure Torquay did an open top bus tour. That must have been pretty surreal. Must have felt like a right little celebrity.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, you kind of worry a little bit because you get on an open bus and think we're just going to be driving around and people are going to be trying to get on it or something because there's not going to be anyone on the roads. And I was just amazed at the fact that the whole route was just lined with Torquay fans. And I think we ended up in the town square by the town hall, and just thousands and thousands of Torquay fans just everywhere, and just surreal. You know it means a lot to everyone, and you know how much it means to those around you, but to the town as a whole, and to come out as they did. And we had 34,000 or 35,000 at Wembley, and however many of those were Torquay fans. It looked like they were all in the town square as well that day. And that was a great moment, to enjoy that open top bus ride when you kind of think this is a bit overkill, was this a bit big time? But actually, the turnout there was incredible. And I remember doing the same thing with Stevenage when we won the conference the year after. Wasn't quite as good in terms of a bus ride. I think we nearly got taken out by a branch, which was the highlight. But yeah, the Torquay open top bus parade. Yeah, even again, I look back at pictures of that and just absolutely love to relive it.
Well, Tim, I'm pretty sure we could be talking about Torquay for another hour, but I suppose it's time we get on to that time at Stevenage, because Stevenage, you just mentioned there, you did win the league. Overall, it wasn't another bad season. You were just going from good to better, even.
Yeah, it was disappointing to leave Torquay in January, and it was always hard to leave somewhere in January, as I'd found
Mm.
when I went to Oxford. Getting Torquay up into the league and scored some big goals even that season. I scored a home to Aldershot in the league against my old club, and scored at St Mary's against Southampton, and Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park in the League Cup. So I had some really good moments even for Torquay that year. But yeah, kind of was told that my time was up. Knew that Graham Wesley at Stevenage wanted me. They were riding high in the conference against taking on Oxford, who randomly are now in the Championship, of course, and Stevenage doing really well in League One. But yeah, went there, didn't score as many goals as I would have liked to, but got a Championship medal. And I remember when I left Stevenage, Graham Wesley saying to me that I'd made the difference between not winning the Championship and having won the Championship, which I wish he'd told me while I was actually there, because I might have actually enjoyed playing for him a little bit more. But yeah, it was another good medal to get, and in the end we were comfortable in terms of title winners that year, which was when you had Oxford and Luton in there, it was a real strong league.
Yeah, definitely. And I think overall it was a good time, Stevenage. But you would go on to join former team Aldershot afterwards. I bet this felt a bit weird returning back to your former team.
Yeah, I was just desperate to get out of Stevenage. I'm not going to lie. Didn't enjoy playing for Graham Wesley at all. Very strange man. But yeah, that would be another hour talking about those stories. So we'll leave that one for now. And I just remember Dean Holdsworth, who I'd spoken to briefly, I think, when he was Newport manager, about potentially going there. And he got the Aldershot job. And I was sat in the car park outside my kids' school waiting to pick them up. And I thought, sorry, I'm just going to send him a little congratulatory text, which I did. And I was like, yeah, well done on getting a job. What a great club it is. If you need a target man who knows the club, let me know. And he rang me back straight away and basically said, yeah, why not? Coming down. And it was perfect. Although I lived a bit further away, I knew the club, and I wanted to help them establish themselves in the football league. And it was great. I went back there, scored a couple of goals away at Chesterfield, and just loved being back there as much as anything. And was really beneficial that Dean Holdsworth took me back there.
And you mentioned about that manager link there, how you gave him a message, and that's how important are networks really involved in football, especially with you now, with players wanting to come to Wimborne. Will they just message you straight away via Twitter? And I'm guessing that's a new way of really initiating players into teams now.
Yeah, it's funny when you see someone follow you on Twitter or Instagram and things like that, and you just go, oh right, okay, that could be an interesting link to have.
Yeah,
But yeah, network is everything. They often say even when you're a young lad, it's more about who you know than how good you are at times.
exactly. Yeah.
Being able to get those opportunities, and that's why I had to work so hard to get into kind of full-time football, because I didn't have that network when I was growing up. I hadn't been in the academy system and long enough to really get my name out there. So yeah, if you can build up that network and get as many contacts as possible. And like I say, it worked for me with Dean Holdsworth, because it just so happened that I had his number in my phone and took a chance, and he ended up taking a chance on me. So yeah, massive about who you know, and couldn't recommend that enough to people already to build up those networks.
Well, there's a tip maybe for anyone watching. If you fancy joining Wimborne, think you're good enough, give him a message on Twitter. But no, speaking about that still time in your career, after Aldershot, you must have been going through your memory bit, because shortly after you go on to join another former team in Basingstoke this time. What was the reasoning behind this?
Yeah, obviously, I was quite keen to stay in full-time football, but I think other than probably Luton, who'd shown a bit of interest, which would have been a good club to go to, there was no one else really in the conference who either was offering me a deal that was worth staying in full-time football, or that matched my ambition. And actually, it turned out that I think it was the Conference South teams. I think it was Havant and Basingstoke, and I think there was one other team, but were actually showing real ambition, and probably offering the same sort of money that a lot of conference national league clubs, national clubs were offering. So So yeah, so it was an easy decision in the end. It was a bit of a journey to Basingstoke, but again, I knew the club. Jason Bristow was well, he wasn't actually manager at the time. It was Frank Gray, funny enough. But I liked what he said, and it was nice to go back there. And also, it just meant I could be part-time and start building up my teaching career away from it as well, and still get paid a decent wage to play football. So it just meant that when I came out of football completely, the wage gap between what I was getting and what I would then earn wasn't going to be as big. So yeah, it was an opportunity to kind of start building my career up outside of football as well.
We spoke about at the start of the podcast how you found your love through playing with your brothers. I'm pretty sure it was at Basingstoke during this 2-year spell that you got to play with one of your brothers in Julian. What was this like playing alongside him?
Yeah, that was the first time I was at Basingstoke was I played with him at Basingstoke. So I played with him at Camberley, played with him at Basingstoke, and then ended up playing with him at Kingstonian for a little while as well. Funny enough, he basically just followed me around everywhere. But no, it was weird, but it made the journeys easier because we were both living at home at the time. So at least you always had someone to come in as a car school. And yeah, I never felt like I was worried about how he'd play, and I'm sure he never felt he was worried about how I'd play. It was it was a joy to play with your brother. Ultimately, I don't think I ever ended up playing against him, which is good. Played against a few of my good mates at times, but yeah, never ended up playing against him. But yeah, it was obviously nice for our parents as well. It meant that they could go and only had to go and watch one game to be able to watch both of us. So yeah, no, it was a special time, definitely.
Well, I think it's fair to say you definitely enjoyed your 2-year spell with Basingstoke. And in 2013, you would go on to have another short spell with a new team, this one being Gosport Borough. What was this? Well, tell me the reasoning behind joining Gosport. Did the cup run really attract you there?
Well, yeah, it was. I was at Bashley, so I started the season at Bashley, and in the Southern Premier, and they'd done really well because we were moving down this way, and they'd done really well to put a package together that suited what I wanted. But it was horrendous at Bashley. I think we won one game. I was scoring a few goals, but we won one game, and it just wasn't enjoyable. And yeah, so I was kind of looking for a way out. The manager got sacked, and I'd already had in my contract that if he got sacked, I could leave. So yeah, so I started looking around at what other possibilities there might be. And it was a bit strange actually. I'd injured my ankle quite badly for Bashley in a game just before I spoke to Pikey at Gosport. So yeah, so when I signed for Gosport, I mean, I remember meeting Alex Piker in Costa in Wimborne, funny enough, and speaking about whether he would quite fancy taking me on, and he did. He was more than up for that. And that was it really. And then I joined Gosport. I did tell him I had a bit of an ankle injury. Turned out I'd actually broken my ankle, which I found out about six weeks later when it was still giving me a bit of jip. I was playing by that point, but I was like, it's still giving me a jip. I'll go and get an X-ray. Turned out I'd broken my ankle, but they were like, it's already healing, so there's nothing you can do. So I actually played the whole of that season for Gosport with a bit of a broken ankle, randomly. And yeah, it was just obviously a league above again, a club that was, I think we were second to bottom at the time when I joined. I remember going to watch the first game when I was injured at Ebbsfleet, and thinking there was no reason why we shouldn't have been beating them, and they were right up there. It was a good group, real solid, good players in there. So yeah, I was excited to join them, and for me, it wasn't too far from where I was living, and it was a league above, and yeah, the trophy run hadn't even started at that point, I don't think. So wasn't to do with that. It was just an opportunity to go and test myself at a high level again.
Yeah, definitely. And even with your broken leg, I think it's safe to say you excelled with Gospel and you really started becoming this fan favourite. And obviously, we mentioned that cup run is significant in Gosport history now. How, as a player, I'm guessing you relish these opportunities for cup runs. Do you really enjoy those?
Yeah, absolutely. They're what can ultimately make the biggest memories in your career. When I look back, like I say, the FA Cup with Camberley, getting to the first round is a massive moment. I got to the fourth round of the FA Cup with Torquay, and these are moments that you look back on and go, got to the trophy final, things like that. Are where sometimes it's the most special. League campaigns are the longest ones and where you're going to get the most satisfaction from if you do well, but just to look back on your career and go, yeah, this was a big moment. And we never expected it. Like I say, we were second bottom in the Conference South when I joined, and we kind of started picking up. And I remember we played Chelmsford at home first game, and I scored and on my debut, and that settled me down in terms of feeling good. But it was such a great club, such a great group of players. They're an absolute crazy gang of players, and it was very different to probably anything else I'd experienced for a long time since probably my Camberley days. So it was nice for me to be back in that sort of atmosphere and trying to integrate myself into that as well as I could. But yeah, the cup runs are really special, but we didn't think about it probably until the quarterfinal, I would have thought, when we actually then realised we had a bit of a chance.
Well, you mentioned about you only really thought about it there until the quarter-final. The semi-final that was something special. Not often in non-league you get such a fierce rivalry in the semi-final of a big competition, but in this one, Gosport will be playing against Hampton Waterlooville, I would say one of their biggest rivals. What was this like going into this draw? Are the preparations different, knowing the atmosphere is going to be immense?
I mean, obviously we'd had North Ferriby away on the game before, who were top of the Conference North, and we never expected to get through that, and I don't think people expected us to get through that. So when the draw came out against Havant, it was almost like fate had brought us to that point, and obviously being in the same league, and just that, like you say, that local rivalry, of course it put a bit more on it. I remember the first leg, the pitch was horrific, absolutely horrific at Havant. The mud was going up over our boots, and for us it was just about staying in it as much to that point, just making sure that we gave ourselves a chance in the second leg, because they were the bigger club, they were the more established club. Gosport had been on this incredible journey with a couple of promotions, had no right of being in an FA Trophy semi-final, but again it was that crazy gang spirit that had got us there. And your approach is definitely different when it's a local derby, but I think that probably helped us as much as anything, because it just gave us that bit more impetus and motivation to really go and not only get ourselves to Wembley, which was a dream for us all, but to put one over our local rivals as well.
Well, the second leg will be played at Privet Park. I think the first leg ended in 1-1, so it was anyone's to win that game. You did score on the stroke of half time, the perfect place to really get a goal. What did Alex Pike say at half time? Was he just saying defend the lead, or even go out and get another, which you did go on to do?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I remember too well of what Pikey said in that respect. I remember before the first leg, we sat in the Havant changing room, and he gave this big speech about how nothing was going to change. It was just another game, and we weren't going to alter anything we did, and everything about it was going to be the same. And then he followed it up immediately by saying that we're going to make 7 changes. And he changed the team a lot, but that was typical Pikey. But no, I'd imagine, having scored in the first leg thanks to a Mike Gosney flick on, it should have been the other way around, but I was happy enough. Scoring on a stroke of half time, I think it just gave us the impetus to make sure that, we knew the pressure was on them at that point to have to come out, to have to get a goal. And we knew we were probably going to get another chance or two, and that we would have to take them. So, I think if anything, the message would have just been to carry on as we were. I didn't think we were under too much pressure in that first half. And like you say, scored at the perfect time.
And Tim, I think it's safe to say you must really love playing at Wembley, because I'm pretty sure it was on the 73rd minute you bagged your second goal for Gosport. Did you figure that was going to be the winning game?
Yeah, you kind of, almost there at that point, aren't you? I mean, I remember it was just a long ball from Andy Forbes, and I was expecting at any minute to get absolutely wiped out by the keeper, who I'd played with at Torquay, funny enough, Scott Bevan. But just remember coming, my back to goal and just seeing this high ball coming and thinking I'm going to get smashed at any second, and just hitting my head, and just that almost disbelief that I'd actually, one, managed to header it, and then 2, just hearing the roar of the crowd. And I remember running off one way and then remembering my son and my wife are the other way, and running over to them and celebrating with them. And pretty much thought it was over until obviously Potey got sent off. And then realizing that we had to then still see it out. But I still think, we were fairly comfortable. I remember coming off with about, 10 or 11 minutes to go, and watching it, and it was unbearable watching it. It's so much easier when you're playing, and now I'm experiencing that every Saturday. But that last couple of minutes again, when it's all over, great times. They're the times where you really kind of enjoy it and soak it all in, and great pitch invasion at the end, and enjoyed all the interviews and all the accolade afterwards as well.
Would that have been the first pitch invasion of your career then?
Um, would that have been? Yeah, probably. I mean, we used to Aldershot have at the end of the season, the fans would come on the pitch after the last home game, but it wasn't really a pitch invasion, not like that. I think yeah, that was my first pitch invasion. Yeah, absolutely. I think I probably only had a couple because Melksham away last year was another one. So
Hmm.
yeah, they're pretty special because they're so improvised and you're not expecting them. So yeah, it was amazing to see such a big crowd there, and I still think the legacy of that is still holding Gosport in fairly good stead with the crowds when you still see them at 900. People still love coming along.
Well, you mentioned about having legacy there. How about having your own day? On the 22nd of February now, I hear all Gosport fans talk about it. It's now known as Tim Sills Day. Not many non-league players, sorry, have their own day. Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's it. Exactly. Yeah, there's a couple of days of the year. So that the 22nd of February and the 17th of May, which come
Mm.
along. And 17th of May was the Torquay goal. And yeah, I see the videos come out and I'm not going to lie, I watch them over and over again. It's just a great excuse. So yeah, it was an amazing team effort from everyone. But I was just fortunate enough to be the one that scored all the goals in the semi-final and kind of etch your name into folklore through doing that. But yeah, it was what a day, to take little old Gosport all the way to Wembley and yeah, when it was so unexpected was just incredible.
Yeah, definitely. Even though the day out at Wembley didn't really go to plan, I'd still say it's an amazing memory, and I still have Gosport fans keep messaging me trying to get you on, so I'm sure they would love hearing about all these memories. But unfortunately, all good things do come to an end, and it was shortly after that you would go on to join Weymouth. And Weymouth, I'm pretty sure that's where you really got your first spell into coaching.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Yeah, it's Weymouth's another big club, obviously league below, and then went in there initially as a player. Second season, I then stepped up to assistant manager with Jason Matthews, and we were close both times. We should have probably got promoted with the players we had and the fan base we had and things, and just missed out on the playoffs both times. And yeah, really frustrating time at Weymouth, really, not to kick them on to the next level, which they obviously then went on to. Under Mark Mosley's tutorship as well. But yeah, it was the first time into the dark side, as we called it, into management. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed taking training, having a bit more influence on tactics and things like that. So just gave me the motivation then eventually to kind of take something on after I retired.
So was this choice then your own one going into coaching, or was this forced upon you via Weymouth?
No, I did. I kind of spoke to Jason Matthews and said, this is something I'd fancy. I knew that his assistant had left. I was like, why not? Let's just do it. Let's have a go. I
Mm.
knew I had something to give back. I felt like my football education was really good. So yeah, I was more than prepared to go into it. And like I say, I really enjoyed it. It was weird coming away from that kind of playing side into the management side and kind of bridging that gap as well. But yeah, frustrating season that we didn't quite make it into the playoffs. But yeah, really enjoyed my first foray into, like I say, into the dark side.
Well, like you were just saying there, it was really your first taste into coaching, and shortly after you would go on to join Blackfield and Langley. Did you know you were starting to approach the end of your playing career? And I'm guessing this was an even harder decision, giving that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my body was telling me that I was approaching the end. And yeah, Blackfield was a bit of a frustrating one, but they'd shown some ambition to sign me. And then I just think I remember it hadn't gone as well as we'd liked. I don't think I was played enough during that season, if I'm honest. But that was fine. My body probably thanked me for it. And then I was on a day trip in London, in Trafalgar Square with the Lions, and Glenn Howes rang me and told me they were cutting the budget, and so they'd need to cut how much I was on. And I just went, that's it, I'm done. I'm retired. That's the moment. I knew it. I was quite happy. I was quite comfortable. I didn't miss it for a long time, I have to say. So yeah, so there was no real sort of melancholy about having to give up my playing career because my body and my mind were ready at that point. And I'd had so many great times that I didn't want to kind of spoil that legacy at all, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And you would go on to become a full-time manager with Hamworthy not too long afterwards. And I think it's fair to say you transformed the club. Within 2 seasons, you got the Hammers promotion, and I'm pretty sure you nearly booked another trip to Wembley.
Yeah, I think I had 2 or 3 years out of the game completely, and then kind of got to the point where I was like, if I don't go into management now, I'm never going to go into
Mm.
management. It's one of those moments. And Hamworthy came up, and one of the guys I worked with was the captain over there. So he was like, look, just apply, see what happens. And yeah, it took a couple of COVID seasons in there, but we were already doing well by the time the first full season came around, and we'd won the Wessex League Cup. Which was the first thing they won for about 20 years, I think.
Mm.
And then, yeah, got the promotion, absolutely stormed to that. Lost in a Dorset Senior Cup final to Paul in the last minute of extra time. And yeah, we're punching above our weight. But yeah, the FA Vars one was the one that stung, that's for sure. Going to, it was the days where it was still a one-leg semi-final, which was a little bit outrageous at that point because we were well through COVID, and away at Newport Pagnell, losing on a penalty shootout was a hard one to take, knowing that I could have walked out of Wembley as a manager as well. Would have been an incredible experience. But yeah, Hamworthy was a great grounding for my management. The pressure wasn't massive. It wasn't a great big budget. It was a real good atmosphere at the club. And yeah, we just so happened to have some incredible times there, which then obviously led to me being able to take on the Wimborne job.
And how did this opportunity come along at Wimborne?
I just think when you look at it, and a lot of people were obviously a bit critical of my decision at the time, saying it was a sideways move. But I think what's happened since probably justifies more than justifies my decision. But yeah, I just saw the Wimborne job had come up. It was something I'd kept an eye on. I could see it was a club that was going places, but just was being held back a little bit on the pitch. And so when it came up, I thought, why not? Let's go and explore the opportunity, see what their ambition is, see what their vision is as well, and see if it matches mine. And yeah, it very much did. And by the sounds of it, from what I've heard since, is that I beat off some good competition as well to get the manager's job. And the brief was there. The brief was there that we had to get promoted within the sort of couple of seasons. And yeah, that's what we managed to achieve. So it definitely turned out to be the right decision.
And how attractive was that trajectory at the time? Because I'm pretty sure it was the first season that you joined, Wimborne was playing in their new stadium.
Yeah, no, it was. I think they'd been there a year or something before, when the pitch had struggled a little bit, and I came in the second season, and yeah, everything was right off the pitch. The infrastructure was good, and so yeah, so no, it was a no-brainer for me, really. I just had to make sure that we kind of changed the culture on the pitch, changed the mentality, and that's what we did in the first season, and then had a bit of a bigger clear out at the end of the season, got our own squad in, and have thrived ever since.
And you mentioned earlier on the podcast that really famous game against Melksham. I'm sure that definitely took a few years off your life, that one, the last day of the season. But what a way to guarantee yourself promotion.
Yeah, that's it. We made hard work of it in the end, but yeah, to do it at a place which had the little steps up as well, so you could go up and take the trophy, and to do it in the way we did it, we never made it easy for ourselves the whole season, so we were never going to do it at the end of the season as well. So yeah, just an incredible day, and so many people have worked so hard for it, away from the pitch, on the pitch as well. So it was great to see everybody be able to enjoy that day fully. And again, it's another video I'll always look back on fondly, and we'll look at the memories of it, because it'll always bring those goosebumps back up as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was a real proud time. You mentioned earlier how it almost probably came the closest to rivalry in that Torquay goal. But going into this season that we're currently in, what was the aims that was told by the Wimborne chairman? Was it just to stay in the Southern Prem?
Yeah, pretty much. It was all about consolidation. It's a competitive league, and it's a league that they've been in before and struggled in most years that they've been in it. So yeah, for us, it was just about coming in and trying to establish ourselves in the league, which we did quite well early on, and then went through a bit of a rocky patch. Didn't really have any consistency until kind of the last 6 games. And yeah, that's what that's what the brief is, to establish ourselves in the league, try and make us a team that is respected in the league, and then hopefully after that we can push on, and in the next sort of 2 or 3 years kind of start really competing at the top end of it as well.
So where would you like Wimborne to be next season?
I think, as long as we can see out this season in the same sort of form we're in now, then next year it's about trying to obviously strengthen again. There's a lot of lessons learned. This has definitely been the steepest learning curve I've had in my career, in terms of what I know I can do better and what we need. So next year, it's about making sure we don't make those same mistakes. and putting ourselves in a position where we know we're competitive, and hopefully we can start not just looking at mid-table, but then looking at what's possible beyond that as well.
And how far do you think yourself can go involving the football pyramid?
Good question. As a manager, you're never sure, are you? I mean, 6 games now,
Exactly,
I'm
yeah.
potentially going to be out on my arse. So yeah, and all of a sudden it's turned round and we're all looking rosy again. So yeah, it's just the life of a manager. But I'm sure at some point I'd love to have a go a bit higher up the pyramid. But I know there's no God-given right to that. So we need to just keep working hard, keep learning, and making sure we're doing a good job where we are first.
And then Tim, coming up for Wimborne, I mean, you're not safe yet, so you're going to have to get some results going forward. But you've got some tasty clashes coming up. You've got Swindon this Saturday. I'm pretty sure it's not too long afterwards. You will be returning back to Privet Park to play Gosport. Looking forward to returning back.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Been back a few times as well, to either watch games or I watched my lad play there in pre-season with AFC Bournemouth, and yeah, really looking forward to that one. I think we've got 9 games left, 6 of them are away, so got a bit of travelling to do. But like you say, we're not safe yet, so we just need to make sure we can get another probably. If we can get another 10 points from our last 9 games, that'll pretty much secure us, I'd imagine. But yeah, just enjoying the ride now. We put ourselves in a good position, and thoroughly looking forward to coming back and yeah, seeing everyone at Gosport again, because it holds some really, really fond memories.
Well, Tim, I think it's safe to say you'll get a very warm reception. It'd be great having you back. And before we end, do you just have any final words to the audience who's been watching?
No, just as always, it's a huge privilege to represent various clubs and go out and try your hardest for them, and it still is now. So to anyone who comes along and watches watches this or comes along to games, we can never be more thankful as players, as managers, and they're the ones that make the game as beautiful as it is.
Well, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I've really enjoyed all your stories, and I'm sure the viewers are going to love it. So make sure to like and subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Cheers.